Boker Tov. Today's daf is daf Ches in Yevmot. As we continue with the discussion about Oleha, why was Oleha necessary to teach us that you don't perform Yibam on a sister-in-law or on her tzara? That's what we're going to continue discussing today. So again, we learned for Shlomo ben Rachel, for Yosef Azriel ben Chaim Michal, and for Elazar ben Reuma. Yesterday we got down to the second answer. What do we give? We said that why do we need Yivami Yavo Aleha to teach us that you don't perform Yibam in a case of Achos Isha, let's say in the other 14, because was it necessary? Don't we say essay is not Docha Losa Shesh Bokares? So even though I have a Yibum, you can't marry your sister-in-law, your wife's sister is Losa Shesh Bokares. So why would I have a half minute? That was what the Gemara dealt with for a few days. And we finally came out yesterday with two answers. We said, well, I might think in a case where Ruvain, who married Leah, died first, and then Shimon married her sister, even though it's technically Achos Kukaso, and that's an Isser Drabanan, but let's say he married her. I might think in a case like that, whole the Ishtri, since Shimon was allowed to marry Leah at the very beginning when Ruvain died, I would say whole the Ishtri, as we saw that concept by Mitzor, whole the Ishtri. So I might think, yes, even though it is an Esed Achalos Sheish Bokares, and that shouldn't be the case, but I would say hold the Ishtri. That was one answer. Another answer we gave was, I would say as a Hekesh of Rabbi Yonah. Rabbi Yonah learns a Hekesh for all the Arayas. There he's talking about Ha'ara, which is like the beginning of Bia with no penetration, to teach us that that's also Chayiv Koris. Hukshu Kol Arayas Kul. Ishtri means since it's mutter, since one thing was mutter, like we saw in the case of Mitzorah, since the Torah allowed him to go in, put his hands into the Azara through the Shari Nikner, since that was mutter, it was mutter also if he was a Balkari. That's what we talked about yesterday. So here we're saying, since it was mutter, meaning Reuven married Leah, died with no children. Shimon was allowed to wife, but instead he married her sister. So, but it was mutter for him for a certain period of time. And therefore, I would think, okay, you know what? That he could still marry her also now, even though he's married to her sister, even though he's married to Rachel. I would think that, Kamash Maran, Oleh, that we don't say that. That's why I need Oleh to teach me you don't say that. That was the first answer. Then we said another answer is, listen, all the riots are if your brother's wife is incest to you just like your sister, right? I'm hearing some background noise here. Do I have to mute? I think it's from the computer. Okay, somebody's making it. Okay, so yeah, I'm just going to mute everybody. If you excuse me, haven't done this in a while. Let's see, mute all. Just there's some background noise. Okay. That's what we're going to do from now on. Mute. Okay, so the second answer is, listen, Eishasach, your brother's wife, is forbidden to you just like your sister. So you would say, well, the Torah said, though, Yibam is okay. So you know what? There's a hekesh between all of them. Hekesh, they're all, why is a hekesh? Hekesh means they're all in the same pasuk. And yet, this one is mutter. So I would think that just like Eishasach, the Torah specifically permitted, Yivama Yavo Aleha, and said you perform Yibam, all the rayas too. That's a second reason. In other words, even though we said what? So why do I need Oleh for? I'll tell you why. Because I would think since the Torah said you do Yibam, and you do it on your brother's wife, no difference in your brother's wife and your half-sister, let's say, from your mother's side, who's married to your brother. I might think that also, even though it seems ridiculous, or your daughter-in-law who's married, right? Your daughter-in-law married your brother. After your son died, he married your brother. So I might think maybe you performed Yibam there too. Kamashman, that's why I mean the Kasar Rahman Allah. This is where we're up to. It's almost halfway down on the page on Chesamara. Okay, so at this point we understand two reasons why we need Aleh. Otherwise, I would think that you perform even on incestual cases, even on arayas. What are you saying over here? You could be makashim to Eishasach. You could say all the arayas are like Eishasach, just like that's mutter. All the other ones are mutter. And what do we do? The other 14, we said they're like a chosisha. Just like a chosisha is forbidden, this is forbidden. My chos is isha akshin. We said yesterday when Rav Yonah's idea that you're makish them all together, and I might think that you form Yibam, even though Eishesach is only one Isser, Eishesach. The other Isurim is Eishesach and Kaloso, let's say, or Eishesach and your sister-in-law, right? So those are two Isurim. But the Gemara, like Rashi explained, Ein Mashivan ala Hekesh. Hekesh, if you learn it from Hekesh, there's no answer to that. You don't say 2, 1, whatever. There's a Hekesh, and that's how you leave it. So he says over here, wait a minute. But you could also, you could be Makish Tachos Isha, right? Based on Alel, that's this Usr. And we said Alel teaches me that she is Usr. But the other 14 also, we say, you could be Makish Tachos Isha and say it's Usr. My Chos Tachos Lachos Isha, Kshun. At the end of the day, even if you say Allah teaches me that a Chos Isha can't, but the other 14, they're learned out from where? From a Chos Isha back in Gimel Amid Beis. Why? Because you're makishim together, because it says, Ki Chol Hashiyas Mikol Tova Se'elav V'nichrasu, right? We had that back on Gimel Amid Beis as well. It said they're all compared one to another. That's also, that was like a Mahatzad. But over here, even without the Mahatzad, you could say, why do you compare them all to Eishesach, to Achos Isha, and say that it's also my Chos Achos Isha, Akshin Eishesach? Why can't you? In other words, you aim Mashivan al Hekesh, but not going to have a Hekesh both ways. I could say, why don't you say that the other 14 are just like Eishesach, just like Eishesach is mutter, the other 14 are also mutter. It's even though it's Eishesach plus another Isser, but it's a Hekesh, aim Mashivan al Hekesh. Why do you compare them to Achos Isha? Even though before the Gemara and back the Yom base was really only a Ma'atzad, but they're all mukish to one another, whether it's your wife's sister, your brother's wife, your sister, your daughter-in-law, they're all arayas. So why do you say you learn it out from Achos Isha and therefore it's Aser? Why don't you learn Eishesach and say it's mutter? The Gemara says, if you have a choice of a hekesh, we go l'chumra. Or you could say, in the case of what? Of Achos Isha and all the other ones, there's two Isurim. There's your brother's wife and she's your wife's sister, right? Or she's your daughter-in-law and she's your brother's wife, right? So there's two. So you compare to Achos Isha, there's two Isurim, right? Whereas rather than 2 from 2, rather than all the other Isurim from Achos Isha where there's two Isurim, Achos Isha plus Eishesach, but over here, in the case of Eishesach, there's only one Isser. It's only Eishesach. I'd rather learn out 2 Isurim from a case of 2 Isurim rather than a case of 2 Isurim from 1 Isser. In other words, they're all arayas. So why don't you say it's like Eishesach? Eishesach is mutter, that's Yibum. So why don't you compare it? Yeah, but I can compare it to Achos Isha also. They're all in the same pasuk. I'd rather go l'chumra, or I'd rather say 2 from 2 rather than 2 from 1. So at this point, though, we're saying that we learn out everything from Aleha. Aleh. How do I know that that Shimon, again, we're going to have that case throughout. Reuben's married to Leah. He dies with no children. Shimon, his brother, is married to her sister, Rachel. How do we know that Shimon shouldn't perform Yibam there? Even though not supposed to normally, but over here, because the pasuk says, Aleh, even in a case of Yibam, but if it's Aleh, if it's your sister-in-law, you don't. And the other ones, we learn out from the other 14, we learn out from there. Akshin, we put the pasuk is makish them all together to Achos Isha. Rava now comes along with a new answer. Rava says, no. Erva gufa lo tzricha kra. I don't need a pasuk for this. Let's go back to Gimel Beis. What do we say? Why would I think that Shimon can marry her? It's Yibam is asay, and the other one's a lo sheish bakaris. Ein esadach lo sheish bakaris. He says, you're right. You don't need a pasuk for that. All this that we've been looking for, you don't really need. Erva gufa lo tzricha kra. Ein esadach lo sheish bakaris. What do I need a pasuk? The tzara of the erva, right? Remember, your wife's sister, you can't marry her anyway. That we know. Can't marry her sister. And the Esra of Yibam is not to say of Achos Isha. But what about her? What about Leah's co-wife? Right? Reuben had 2 wives. Leah, the sister, the older sister, let's say, plus a co-wife. Whatever we'll call her. What do we call her? Chana, Zipporah, whatever. We'll call her Chana for now. We'll see tomorrow when we get more into details about what we'll go on with Rashi's names. It's for the tzara. It says more of erva lo tzricha kra. You don't need a pasuk for erva. We learned before. We learned before. Ein li'elahi. Back in Gimel Beis, we said that's only the wife, right? We had the pasuk of isha l'chas l'tzikach. Ein li'elahi tzarasa minai. It's mashma. You need a pasuk for erva. No. So mishum tzarasa. really you didn't need a pasuk for erva. Erva is emes adachalos sheish bakaras. But the tzara, how would I know that she's also? For that, I need a pasuk. The Eli Elahi. It's mashma that the kasha back on Gimon Bay seemed to say that we need a pasuk for herself, for the erva. So that's no, Mishum Tzaras. It's only because of the tzara that we were asking. That was just a preamble to the question. I only know that she is also, but she's really also because Eines Adachalos Sheish Bakaras. I've Ella Hain. We also said over there that's only them. How do we know that Tzaros and the Tzaros, etc. Mishum Tzaras saying that's only because of Tzaras saying. But the truth is, the erva itself, would be also because Eines Adachalos Sheish Bakaras. Yeah. Yes.
And he dies at that trip.
Right. Shimon, in a normal case, Shimon marries either one of them, not two. Because it says, we'll see later on, it says, is a choice, whichever one. If both of them are mutter to him, then he can marry either one, whichever one he chooses. Okay. You can only do one. It says you can only bias, throwing off the word bias, once he marries one of them, the other one is also to him like Eshesach. The other one is incestuous. That's the rule. Okay, but over here in this case, he can't marry Leah because she's Rachel's sister, and because then he can't marry Chana either. That's what we learn out. But that's what I need the pasuk for, only for the tzar. Now the Gemara is going to ask that. Tashma, Rebbe is going to learn the whole drasha differently, not from Aleh, and all that. He says, how do you know that you don't marry the erva and the tzara from the pasuk? Pasuk says over there, ula kacha, right? The lakachlo the isha ula kacha the yivma. It doesn't say the yivma, it says yivma. There's an extra hey by the look. Instead of a lakach, it says ula kacha, and instead of yibam, it says yivma. He says from here you learn lesser tsaras for right. It's must be two extra hays there in either like two extra words, two extra letters, one for tsaras and one for arayas. So it's mashmi. You do need a pasuk for erva. Why don't you say, according to what Rabbi said before, we don't even need the whole last 5 blot. We don't need, right? We don't need aleh. You need it for the tzara. Mashma over here though he says lesser tsaras for arayas. Again, aim a lesser tsaras shel arayas. When he says when Rebbe says that, it means to ask the tsaros of the rise. But there's two. So he's got 2 psukim. What are you to do? My love chad le'erva v'chad l'tzara. Isn't one for the erva, for the sister-in-law herself, and one for the tzara? Says lo, eat evil. They're both for the tzara. Listen to this carefully. Chad l'meis tzara makom mitzvah. Listen carefully now. One is to aser chana the tzara in the case of a mitzvah, like you said. Reuben died, left 2 wives. Shimon cannot marry Leah because it's his sister-in-law. He can't marry the tzara either. But I told you, remember, there's a case where where this woman can't be married to his brother. For example, let's say it's his mother. Reuben and Shimon's mother. Let's say Reuben's mother. Can Shimon be married to? Neither Reuben or Shimon can marry either one of them's mother because the mother is always the father's wife. Right, and you can't marry your father's wife, and they're only they both have the same father. Otherwise, the whole yibum doesn't apply. So, who would she be married to? Who would his mother be married to? Yankala, some other guy, right? Whoever, Yankala. Okay, so let's say Yankala dies. Okay, Yankala was married to this guy's mother, right? He's his stepfather, married this woman. And yes, can Reuven or Shimon marry the co-wife of Yankala? Yes. She was the tzara of his mother. Yes, but the Isser is only when the tzara fell yibum together, when it fell yibum to Shimon. Here it wasn't a case of yibum. She was just married to some other guy. Your mother, your father died or whatever. Your mother married some guy. He was married to another woman too, and now he dies. You could marry that other lady. You just can't marry your mother, of course, but you can't marry the other. You could marry the other. That's what it means. That's tzara shaloba makom mitzvah. There is no yibum. When there's no yibum, you could marry your mother's co-wife. You understand? You could. There's no way to. That's what he needs 2 psukim for. Meaning, as we'll see, b'makom yibum, then it's usher to marry the tzara. But if it's not a case of yibum, then you could marry the tzara, like the case of your mother being married to somebody else. My time, the yibum, makom yibum, who does see tzara? Only case of yibum is the tzara from Mishalem makom yibum, shara tzara. So at this point, we're saying that according to Rabbi, you don't need a pasuk to tell me you can't marry your sister-in-law. You need a pasuk only for the tzara. Rabbi needed 2 pasukim. There was one to say that the tzara is usher in a case of yibum, and one to say that if it's not yibum, you could marry the tzara. Rav Ashi says, you know what? It's much like this Mishnah too. When Rava said you don't need a pasuk for the chos isha for the sister-in-law herself, Rav says you see that in the Mishnah too. You can deduce that from the Mishnah. Tani chamesh nashim Poter starts saying the mission doesn't say the ilu pturas pturas lotan doesn't say 15 women are poter. You know why? Because we have this old drasha. No, the 15 women we know anyway would be poter. Einas adocha losa sheish bakaras. Yibam would not be docha alosa sheish bakaras. And achosisha and all the other ones mentioned in the Mishnah are all losa sheish bakaras. So I don't need a pasuk for that. It just says these 15 women also potter the tsaros. The tsaros are also potter. Why? That's what you need a leha for at this point. That's what we're saying now. We give you a leha. That's what Rava said. Rava said you don't need a pasuk. What do you need? Ki yitzchakra. What do you need the pasuk of a leha for this? And as we'll see, Rebbe says you don't need a leha at all. Rebbe learns the whole thing out from Balakach Balaka, the extra Ulakacha, and from Yivma. We'll talk about Rebbe later on. So Shema Minai Takasi from our Mishnah, you don't need a pasuk to be Maghrib. So we have many answers here so far. Do you understand? We have why for 5-6 plot we've been saying why do you need a leha? So we said okay, either because of the whole ishti or because of the hekesh. I might think you're makish to Eishasach Kamash makish to Achosisha. That was one, but we use a leha. Rabbi says you don't need a leha for that. You need a leha only for the tzara. Rebbe says you don't need a leha at all for these things. A leha is for a different drasha entirely. It has nothing to do with this. It's learned out from Yibma. Says the Gemara, wait a minute. Listen, the pasuk it says that you can't marry your sister-in-law. What does it say in general? You can't marry your sister-in-law. How do you know you can't be like Yaakov Avinu and marry two sisters? Because the pasuk says Isha lachosa losikach litzror. In that same pasuk, because you can't marry your wife's sister, alachosa litzror. Can't marry the tzara either. You can't marry your wife's sister tzara either. So that's also in the pasuk. Why do we read the pasuk for? The Gemara now says Umayshna ever the load sricha kra. Dein as a dochalosa sheish bakares. As it can't be dochalosa bakares. Saranami lo to bakra mishum dein as a dochalosa sheish bakares. Because since the pasuk says Isha lachosa lo sikach litzror, it tells you not only can't you marry your sister-in-law, you can't marry your sister-in-law's co-wife. You can't marry your wife's sister. You can't marry your wife's sister, and you can't marry the tzara also of your wife's sister. You can't marry either one of them. And Rashi explains. Sorry, Namilo to boy aleh di Russia. The Enes Sedach Bakaras. The Siv Litzror, the Mashmalo Achosisha below Tzarasa. You can't marry your wife's sister or Tzara, and it says Karas over there. Litzror, and you're going to be Chayiv Karas. That's what it says. Litzror Siv. Karas was so far rise. It says you shouldn't take them, and it says Karas. So maybe the Tzara also you can't marry. What do I need a pasuk for? In other words, the tzara of your wife's sister, even in a regular case, your wife's sister, it's kares. You can't marry your wife's sister. You know what? You can't marry your wife's sister's co-wife either. That's based on the pasuk, because it says you shouldn't marry your wife's sister and her tzara, and they're both chayiv kares. Listen carefully. You're right. I agree with you. What Rava said, when Rava said you don't need a pasuk to teach me that your wife's sister is, you don't do yibam. Why? Because that applies to your wife's sister's co-wife also. You're right. You're right. You don't need a special pasuk for that. I don't need a leah for that at all. I don't need a leah for that because your wife's sister is usher to you on punishment of kares. And the tzara also has the same halacha. It says litzror and it says kares there. What do I need the pasuk? What do I need the pasuk of a leah for? Again, to permit the tzara where it's not a mitzvah. Let's say your mother's co-wife. Your mother can never be married to your brother. That's clear, right? Mother can't be married to your brother because your mother is your father's wife. She can never. And there's 5 more cases like that. We'll see that in Daf Yomi. So you can't marry. So that's shalom malka mitzvah. It's not a mitzvah yibam. So that to be matter at that. That's what I need a leah for. My time. How do you learn that out? Aleh, I thought is an isser. How do you tell me this had to my time? Aleh, the malkum aleh, when it's a mitzvah of yibum, because we learned out aleh from yibum. Remember the Gzeir Shava. Aleh it says aleh by yibum, it says aleh by chosisha. When malkum aleh, when it's a mitzvah huda sira, that's when it's also to marry the tzar. Shalom malkum aleh shar. But if it's not aleh, meaning if it's not a yibum, that's how you learn it out. So it's learned out aleh says, when is that isser of achos isha and the tzara? Only where the makom mitzvah when there's yibum, but it's not a case of yibum. Your mother was married to some guy, we'll call him guy, and he had a co-wife and he died or divorced them, whatever. You can marry that woman. It's mutter to marry a tzara. Amalei Rami or Chamala Rava. Ema erba gufish lo makom mitzvah tishri. So maybe if that's the case, if you're saying the whole list of achos isha is only where in a case of yibum, maybe you can marry your. If it's not a case of yibum, maybe you can marry your sister-in-law too. Now, like Yaakov Avinu, maybe you can marry 2 sisters. It's only forbidden maybe in a case of yibum. Maybe that's what you say. Ema erba gufish lo makom mitzvah tishrei. So Gemara says, I understand, but lav kavachomu, but makom mitzvah us. If it's also to do it in the case of yibum, you can't marry your sister-in-law, your wife's sister. Shalom makom sorry. How could you say that when it's not a mitzvah, you can marry your wife's sister? Amalei tzara tachich. Look at the tzara. The makom mitzvah sira. If you want to use logic, you want to give me a kavachomer, I'll give you a simple answer. Look at the tzara. The makom mitzvah it's usher. You can't marry your wife's sister's tzara for yibum. V'shalom makom mitzvah shari. If it's not a case of mitzvah, like your mother's co-wife, then you're allowed to. So maybe shalom makom mitzvah, you can marry your wife's sister. Amalei olech amakra. The pasuk says b'chayeha. Okay, litzror. The pasuk says ishalcha lo sikach litzror legalos erbasa aleh b'chayeha while she's alive. Kol she'b'chayeha. In other words, whenever she's alive, no matter if it's for the mitzvah or not for the mitzvah, you can't marry your wife's sister. Maybe it's to conclude that after death, right? That if your wife's sister died, right? If you're not after your wife died, you could marry your sister. In other words, if Reuben and Shimon were married to two sisters, right? And your wife died, and then Reuben died, you could marry Leah, right? Because your wife is already dead, so you can marry her sister. So that's what you need. In other words, the isser of achos isha b'makom yibum is only when they're alive. But if your wife died, so maybe you can't. So that's what I need b'chaya for. Maybe the case of mitzvah. But if it's not a mitzvah, maybe you could marry your sister-in-law even if your wife was still alive. So he says, no. Achamisa himi isha lachosa nafka. That's misha lachosa, your wife with her sister, if they're both here at the same time. So that I already know lachamisa from there. It says, no, isha lachosa avimin niskar shari. No, that doesn't help me. Isha lachosa tells me if you have a wife, you can't marry your sister at that time. And let's assume that's for the mitzvah, only one case of mitzvah. But I would think that if you divorced her, if you divorced your wife, then you could marry her. You're married, right? You're Shimon. Shimon's married to Rachel, he divorces her. Then he could marry Leah if she fell to Yib. And that's what I believe. If she no, as long as she's still alive, which is the halacha. We've said many times, right, that if a woman died in childbirth, it was very common for him to marry her sister because she died. But if he divorced her, he can't marry her sister. As long as your wife's still alive, you can't marry her sister. So you need b'chayeh for that. That's what b'chayeh teaches me. Isha l'chos just tells me you can't marry them while you're married to your wife. You can't marry the sister. But b'chayeh tells me that as long as she's still alive, you can't marry even if it was divorced. But after she's dead, you could. So that's in the case of a mitzvah. But maybe shalom b'makom mitzvah, you could marry your wife's sister, just like the tzara. You can't marry your makom mitzvah, but you could marry a shalom makom mitzvah. Like, for example, your mother's co-wife. She's married to a guy, and there's no mitzvah there. You could marry after. So maybe the same thing with your wife's sister. Only b'makom mitzvah you can, but shalom makom mitzvah you could. Elam Rav Huna, it's a logical question. Elam Rav Huna bar Techlif Mishmei Rav. I'll explain. Let me explain it. Trey Kroiksiv. Again, Rava is going with the idea. We've had a few ideas here. Rava is going with the idea that you need aleha, right? We're saying you still need aleha, but what for? What for? You don't need it for the erva or for the tzara because eina sedach lo sheish bakaras. What do you need it for? To be mater the tzara shel makom mitzvah, right? So if that's the case, maybe the erva itself should be also muter shel makom mitzvah, right? Maybe the erva itself, your sister-in-law itself. Let's not talk about your daughter or somebody like that because that's the feeling is just too incestuous. But your wife's sister, maybe shalom makom mitzvah, maybe you're allowed to marry her. The only issue is maybe makom mitzvah. So the answer is what the Khalifa says. This is the pshat. This is what Rava said. Trey Kroiksiv. There's two parts to the pasuk. Ksiv isha lachosa lo sikach litzror. That tells me you can't marry your wife's sister nor the tzara, right? Two people. Isha lachosa, right? The sister and litzrora. Uksiv legalos erbasa alea b'chaya. Her, you can't reveal her nakedness, meaning one person. Echada, mashma, one person. So where is it that two people are usher, and another case we have where one person is usher? Okay, so the makom mitzvah, if it's yibam shtein asuras, both the woman and the tzara are both usher. Shalom makom mitzvah. Without a makom mitzvah, he asur v'tzarasa muteras. In other words, again, according to Rava, the basic idea of the erva and the tzara, you can't marry because of eina sedach lo sheish bakaras. But the pasuk is teaching me more. The pasuk is teaching me more than that. From the words, smash with two people are usher. Then it's smash with one person are usher. What's pshat? When two people are usher, why? b'makom mitzvah. B'makom mitzvah, they're both asur, meaning the erva and the tzara. Shalom b'makom mitzvah, he asur b'tzara matas. Even though Rava holds that einas hadachalos sheish balkares, right? I don't need a pasuk to teach me that it's asur. I would think anyway it's asur, but he's telling you no, that it's only asur b'makom mitzvah. Shalom b'makom mitzvah, the tzara is mutter. Shalom b'makom mitzvah, he asur. You can't marry your sister, but you can marry the tzara. What does it mean shalom b'makom mitzvah? She wasn't married to your brother. Makom mitzvah means she's married to your brother, and your brother died with no children. That's makom mitzvah. That's yibum. Shalom makom mitzvah. She's married to Guy. She's married to Guy, right? Shalom makom mitzvah. Again, Ruvain's married to your sister-in-law, to your wife's sister, and to Hannah, right? And you're married to Rachel. So when Ruvain dies, you can't marry either one. You can't marry Leah because that's your wife's sister, and you can't marry Sarah Hannah. However, let's say this same Hannah is married to is married. Hannah and Leah are married to one guy, Reuben. Yeah, they're married to Shlomi now, right? Okay, let's say they're married to Shlomi. Your sister-in-law, she's still your wife, same wife, sister, it's the same woman, Leah, and Hannah is married to Shlomi, and Shlomi dies. You can marry Hannah because it's not case of Yibam. That's what he said. It says Gemara, maybe the other way around. But makom mitzvah. Why don't you say makom mitzvah he asur b'tzar matzeres? Why don't you say this way? If you're learning it that way, that the pasuk is mashma two isurim, it's mashma one isur. So you said two isurim makom mitzvah. Shalom makom mitzvah only the wife is only the erva is also the sister-in-law, not the tzara. Why don't you say the other way around? But makom mitzvah in the case where there's yibum, your sister-in-law is asur and the tzara is mutter. Shalom makom mitzvah if they're both married to Shlomi, shtei asur. Why don't you say that? Zim kain lo yomela. What do I need to laugh for? If the pasuk would tell me. Here there's two isurim and here there's one isur. What would you say logically? That would just be logic. So listen over here is a mitzvah involved. If without oled, I would say, there's a mitzvah involved, then you can marry the tzara. There's no mitzvah involved, don't marry the tzara. You can't marry your sister-in-law, right? You can't marry your sister-in-law, and you can't marry her tzara. That's what I would say logically. Is what are you left for? Rashi explains. Logically, I would say that if I have one case where you can't marry either one of them, the sister-in-law and the tzara, and one case where you could marry the tzara, I would say marry the tzara. In the case where there's yibum, there's a mitzvah involved over there. So I would say logically, that's the other way around. Amalei Rashi Lev Kana. Yeah, sir. Amalei Rashi Lev Kana. Imai dahai oleh li isura. How do I know b'chlal oleh is isur? Now we're gonna uproot the whole thing. In other words, until now. We mentioned Rebbe before. We're going to talk about Rebbe again. Until now, everybody agrees with Aleha, that's Russia, right? The first idea was I might think hold Ishtri, even though ain't a spechlas ishbakars hold Ishtri, or because there's a hekish too, I might think they're all mukish to Eshesach and it should be mutter. Kamash Mulan, Aleha that don't. Rava holds yes, you need Aleha, but Aleha for the drasha of to teach me that in the case of Yibam. There's no sister. You don't marry the sister-in-law or the tzara, and the pasuk is mashma two isurim and one isur. So the Allah has to be matzah the tzara when it's shalom makom yibam, but b'makom yibam it's asur. How do you know that at all? What does Allah do? Allah connects yibam, yavama yavo Allah, and legalos erbasa Allah b'chaya, the sister-in-law that you can't. So we say even in a case of achos isha, whereas yibam you can't do it because Allah. Maybe it's the other way around. Maybe it's to tell me that in the case of Yibum, you do allow, you do marry the sister-in-law. Says that he said turn the whole thing around. Maybe it's just the opposite. It's what Hashem is telling us. You shouldn't marry your wife's sister or her tzara, but there's no mitzvah Yibum. Your wife's sister is married to some other guy, right? Some other guy. And she has a sister, and she has a co-wife Chana. You can't marry her sister if your wife is still alive, and you can't marry the tzara. Maybe that's what it's speaking about. When there's a mitzvah, stein mutaris. Maybe they're both mutar. Maybe turn around the whole table. Back from Gilman Beis. You said, even makam yibam, you don't perform it if it's your sister-in-law. Just the opposite. Maybe the sister-in-law you can't marry or marry her or not marry tzara. Shalom makam mitzvah. There's no yibam. Well, there's even maybe you can marry both. Makam aleh, they're both mutar. You can only marry one of the two, right? The guy could have 20 wives, right? You only marry one, but they're all mutter. So the came, if that would be the case, we just explained before that the pasuk is mashma 2 and it's mashma 1, right? It says Isha, Isha lachosol tzikach letzur, that's 2, the sister-in-law and the tzara, and that's the legalos evrasa dechada 1. So where's one? Even makom mitzvah, if it's makom mitzvah, you're saying both would be mutter. Ishla mitzvah, shtein asuras. Where do you have case of one? It only makes sense to say that where is one and not the two? Two is where there's a mitzvah, and shalom makom mitzvah, the tzara is mutter. That's how we come out. That's all if you learn out from Aleha. In other words, based on Aleha. Gufa, but let me mention Rebbe. We asked Rebbe because we said before, well, Rava, how could you say that Erva herself is obvious? You don't need a pasuk for that. That's what Rava said. For the Erva herself or for the Tzara, the whole pasuk is coming to teach me that the Tzara shelo b'makom mitzvah, if she is the co-wife of your mother, right? Or even of your sister-in-law, but it's not a case of even. She's married to Shlomi, right? Something like that. Then it's mutter, right? Even in a case like that. In other words, the case that I gave with the mother can never be married to your brother, right? Can never be, if you're Shimon, can't be married to your other. But there are many cases where the Tzara, your sister-in-law is married to some guy, and there's a co-wife there too, certainly with Gufa. So Rebbe learned it all differently, not from Aleh at all. Rebbe Yomi v'lakach v'ulakacha v'yibem v'yibma. In other words, the pasuk says ulakacha, and the pasuk says v'yibma. Instead of v'lakach, it says ulakacha, and instead of v'yibma, it says v'yibma. Lesser tzaros v'arais, to asa tzaros v'arais, and we said, and on a manalef, we said, according to Rebbe, he'll learn lesser tzaros k'arais. K'arais is obvious. It says more immediate tzaros k'sibehacha. Does it say tzaros in this pasuk? In the case of your sister-in-law, it says like litzror. Here it doesn't say anything tzaros. That's number one. But tzaros min litzror nafka. Tzaros is only learned out from litzror. The answer is no. Litzror mapik like Rav Shimon. He uses litzror for a different brusher. Rav Shimon is going to see later on holds the following case. Listen to this case carefully. Reuben and Shimon are married to two sisters, but they both die. There's another brother, Levi. What does he do? What is Levi's, let's say, single, okay? Or doesn't make any sense otherwise. He's got two sisters fell to him. Now, each one is what we call achot zkukato. So we hold that technically you could do yibum over there. It's not a chos ishto. It's like a shtickle married. I use that. Rashi says, zika have kitzat kedushin. That's what Rashi says. Okay, so he can't. So the halacha is he doesn't do yibum to either one. But technically he could marry one of them. He can marry one of them, right? Technically he can marry one of them because he's not married to either one of them. So it's like a partially married. So technically he could, but the rabbis say don't do it. Do chalitza. Do chalitza to both. Do chalitza because one's falling from Reuben, one's falling to you from Shimon, right? So do chalitza on both. That's what the rabbi said. You do chalitza on both. Rabbi Shimon holds no. He learns that from Litzror that when two sisters fall to you to Yibam, that they're like co-wives now, they're both like co-ziko, you don't do chalitza or Yibam. As we said before, kosher ain't no Yibam, ain't no chalitza. And he says there's no Yibam here either. The rabbis hold there is Yibam here, but better don't do it because it's like if you marry either one of them, it's like you're marrying your wife, your partial wife's sister. So better just do chalitza, right? But Reb Shimon holds no. Litzror teaches me that when two sisters fall to you, not if you're married to one of them, if two sisters become tsaras to one another in Yibam, because Reuben and Shimon both died in a car accident, and Levi's left with these two sisters. So Reb Shimon says, you know what, you don't do Yibam or chalitza because there's pasuk. Learn that from the pasuk. Litzror, that's what he says in this pasuk. So pardon? No, you can't marry. Everybody holds you can't marry either one of them. Reb Shimon holds it's also to marry both of them, also to keep them, and therefore you don't do chalitza either because it's based on the pasuk. Litzror, if they become co-wives in this manner, it's also that Torah specifically forbids them. It's incestuous. It's like your brother died having children. It's incestuous, and the Rabbanan say no, do chalitza because technically the could even it's not really a chos ishto. So that's what he uses it for. Back in the Gemara, Litzror. What does he do with Litzror? The Litzror he uses for Reb Shimon's brasha. He holds like Reb Shimon. Tzara, but Tzara hechiksiva. The gear says, where does it say Tzara? How can he learn out Yibam v'Yibma and V'lakach v'likcha v'Yibam v'Yibma? The extra hay teaches me that the Tzara is the Tzara is hechiksiva. Hachigam. This one means Im kain le makrav v'lakach. Say v'lakach my ulakacha. Kalecha dika trei likuchim. Lakacha sounds like there's two. You could choose this one, not v'lakach like one. Ulakacha take take one out of the two. That's what it means. You could trade when you could do one. Again, when the two women fall to you, Yibam, if your brother's married to two sisters, died with no children, you can marry either one of them. You could have done this. Shari, then you're allowed to do Yibam. V'lo, if you can't marry either, if you can't marry both, what does that mean? You can't marry both. You can't marry your wife's sister, right? Because let's say they're both usher. That's what he learns out. That's how we know that your wife's sister is also your wife's sister, and the tsar is usher. The yibma, that's how we know it's Sarah. Because if you can marry both of them, if you have a choice, you can marry either one, then there's yibam. If you can't marry both of them, you don't have a choice. You can't marry one of them. Why? Because she's your sister-in-law, and you can't marry the other one either. That's how we know it's Sarah. It doesn't say the word Sarah there, but the yibma means you have to have a choice. If you have a choice of this one or that one, then you can marry either one. But if you don't have a choice of this one or that one, because one of them is your sister-in-law, and your sister-in-law is also to you, then there's no Sarah either. That's how we know Sarah there. Below Tavayr Surim, the yibma, what does that teach me? Only b'makam yibma. Who does Sira Sarah? The Sarah that we just talked about is only also where there's yibam. Shalom makam yibam. If she's married to Shloimi, not to Ruvain, then Shari Tzara, the Tzara's mutter. Okay, so Rebbe learns the whole drasha of what? Of that the Tzara is usher, and that she's only usher makam yibam and not Shalom makam yibam. He learns that out from the words the yibma, the ulakacha, and the yibma. So what does he do with the leah? We'll see. Rabbanan hai ulakacha mai. What do the Rabbanan do with ulakacha? He bought like Rav Yosef B'chanina. They use it for Rav Yosef B'chanina's brush. Don't Rav Yosef B'chanina. Ulakacha melamed shemagar shebeget umachzira. Listen to this. Ulakacha means once you marry her. Listen to this carefully. Shimon, Reuben dies, left a wife, right? Left a wife, and now Shimon has to perform yibam, right? Shimon performs yibam. He's not married to anybody else. He marries her, yibam. Now he doesn't like her anymore. He divorces her. After a while, he divorces her. He performed the mitzvah. He divorces her. Can he marry her again, or is she now also to him like Eishasach, like as if the brother had children? No, the pasuk says that ulakacha. Once he marries her, she's a full wife, a regular wife, and the holiness of Eishasach has fallen away, and therefore it's a wife. And if he divorces her now, there's no chalitza. Chalitza is only if he doesn't perform the yibum. And once he's his wife, you have to give her a get. And not only that, he could take her back. If he's not a Kohen, of course, and he wants to marry her again, but she didn't marry somebody else, because she's a regular. You might say, well, it's Eishasach. It still is. There's an incestuous relationship, except the Torah says, do yibam, yeah, marry her, and that's it. But once you're not married to her anymore, maybe you can't. No. See, that's what Lukacha teaches me. What does the yibma teach me? Al karcha. Normally, can you marry a woman al karcha? You go to a woman, you say, listen, take this ring. I have a gun to your head. Take this ring. And if you're not, I'm going to blow your brains out. Does that work? No. But by yibam, it does work. If he raped her, we'll see later on in the 6th parak. If he raped her, he's koning her because she's already married to him in a way. There's a zika there. We'll talk about that. But al karcha, you marry al karcha. For Rebbe, so how does Rebbe know those drushes? Rebbe uses the yibam to teach me that the tzara is aser. B'makam mitzvah and shalom makam mitzvah it's mutter. Rabbi Yosef B'chanina he learns Maliisha. It says l'kacha lo leisha, right? L'kacha lo leisha v'yibma leisha. Once is your wife. She's a full wife. You can divorce her. You can remarry her if you're not a Kohen, etc. Al kacha mi yavama yavo aleh. The pasuk says yavama yavo aleh. He will come to her, not even if she doesn't consent. Nafka. For Rebbe, high oleh. Back to our question now. Rebbe learns it's all out the tzara, that it's asur makam mitzvah and shalom makam mitzvah. It's mutter. What does he do with aleh? Look at a time. Use it for a different drasha entirely. Look at a time. What's the drasha? The drasha is as follows. Look at a time. We know there's a halacha of parum davashel sibur. If Besin Paskin's wrong and most of Bnei Israel follows him in an isser, they have to bring what's called the parum davashel sibur. We discussed that in Horios. Okay, in many places in Shas. So he says, listen to this. Ein chayav Bezdin only chayav to bring this problem of Ella al davar shazon kosher gas chata. It's not if they told everybody to eat, let's say basar b'cholav. Basar b'cholav is only a lav. If you eat a McDonald's cheeseburger, it's only a lav. It's not doner kosher gas chatas. So they're only chayav to bring a problem of if they paskin wrong about something that's doner karas. If you did it b'meiz, you're chayav karas. It goes chatas. B'chein Mashiach, the Kohen Gadol, if he paskins wrong and follows it the same thing. Below b'vras kachavim. And also, avodas kachavim and the tzibur that's chayav to bring. We'll see a par la'olan sar l'chatas only on something which is davar shel kosher chatas. What does that mean? For example, sacrificing a carbon, offering incense to the avodah zarah chas v'chila, libations, bowing down. But let's say you just go over and kiss the idol, give it a good hug and kiss. That's also, but it's not doner kosher gas chatas. You only chayav these isurim on paskin of us. What does all this have to do with us? We'll see. Utnan nami kol mitzvah shebetorah shechayim al zon kosher gas chatas Yachid, what is it normally? Yachid maybe kizbosi. A yachid, an individual. Let's say you ate chaylev b'shogeg. You bring a kizbo or a seira, a little female lamb or a female goat. Nasi, he brings a sa'ir, a male goat. Mashiach, the Kohen Gadol, Ubezdin, Levi Par, they bring the palm of Shel Sibor. Whereas Kechavim, Yachid, Nasi, Mashiach, all three individuals, the Yachid, and the king, and a Mashiach, Mavi and Seira, they bring a female goat, and Sibor, maybe in Par Basar, Par Lo Basar Lachatas. Nice. That's a nice synopsis of the Yisurim, right? Or what karbanos you bring for Sibor and for Yachid. Where do we get this from? The Tanur Rabbanan. The pasuk says in Vayikra, but when it talks about Parham Davashal Sibur, they made a mistake and they passed wrong. But no da chatas shechatu oleh, it will be known. Rebbe Omer nemer kan oleha. Oh, what does it say? No da chatas shechatu oleha. The chatas that they sin by. We're talking about a sin, nothing to do with women and yibum, right? But the Nemer Holana, it says where does it say oleha? Where litzror, right? It says it's litzra leah bechaya. Where is that pasuk isha lachoso losikach litzra? Where is that found? In Vayikra, in Achrimos, in Vayikra Yudches, and this is in Vayikra Daled. So later on in Yudches it says what? Aleh when it comes to not marrying your sister-in-law. If you marry your sister-in-law, you're married to your wife and you sleep with your sister-in-law, you're chayav koros for that, or b'shogeg you're chayav chatas, right? How do we know that the Isser of Param Davashot Sibur and all that is only Davashot Chatas? We're not from Allah. That's what Allah is used for, right? Ashkan Sibur. That's the tzibur, because it says here, we know that Chatas Shechat talking about the tzibur. What about the Kohen Mashiach? Menolan, the Chsiv Mashiach la'oshmas ha'am. Like he sins la'oshmas ha'am. His sin is like that of the am. Okay, so just like the am is Zonachos Shigur Chatas, same thing by the Kohen Gadol. Hare Mashiach Ketzibur. Yochad v'nasi, how do we know? Asi mitzvos. It says asa achas mipol mitzvos ha'ela. It says mitzvos by both, right? By both the tzibur and the yachid. So we compare them also. So yachid is also only chayev. Only chayev where? Where is he chayev bring only the shigaso chatas? In other words, he only brings the chatas where it's donor cars. Otherwise, he doesn't bring a chatas. He's over a lot. V'nasi mitzvos. Below baras kachavim. El al dav shechavim because how do we know it's kamal shchatas? It says me'ene am, right? They made a mistake, both in the case of Palm Shel Sibor and the case of where they made a mistake and they did Avodah Zarah. And Yachid Nasi Mashiach mi im nefesh achas. The pasuk goes on to say there by Avodas Kachavim, which is in the parsha of Shlach. It says there im nefesh achas, right? Echad Yachid, ve'echad Nasi, ve'echad Mashiach b'mashma. Above most volume Yerushan, and it adds on to the beginning. As we talked about before about the tzibur, and it says now about a yachid. Nefesh achas refers to anybody. A nasi, a yachid, a mashiach, they're all nefesh achas. Learn the lower one from the upper one. In other words, okay, so that's all for now. Rabbanan high svara minalu. How do the Rabbanan know this idea? Which are the Rabbanan? The Rabbanan who use oleh to teach me that achos isha, that tsar of achos isha is usher, right, or is mutter in the case where it's not makom mitzvah. That's what we used oleh for before. Now it's the other rabbis, not Rebbe, who learn out from oleh the drasha, either to come against a whole ishti or to go against the hekesh, or like Rava says, just to teach me about the tzara. Rabbanan, how do they know that if oleh is used? How do they know that this idea that what you're only chayav palm davashel tzibur, etc. and the Kol Mashiach, if it's davashel zon kashmas, they don't use oleh. They use oleh to teach me achos isha. There's no yibam there, or the tzara at least. Rabbanan high svamanalu nafkulu minimakulu Yeshua l'Rebrei. Rabbi Yeshua taught his son Torah achas yilachem losa b'shgaga. The pasuk says one Torah for everybody did shogeg, and it says v'hanefesh asher tasa b'yavrama. If you do things on purpose, you're chayav chorus. Hukshu kol atar kula avras kachavim. Right? Compare it to avras kachavim that we said before. Maros kachavim davashel chatas. Av kol davashel chatas v'shigaso chatas. Okay. In other words, because by avodah zarah it says over there Torah chsiyolachem, and if you did it b'mezid, you're going to be chayav kares. So it's all comparable to all learned out from avodah zarah, not learned out from aleh from the case of achos isha, but learned out from avodah zarah. Ashken yachid v'nasi mashiach. So that teaching yachid because it says hanefesh isha tasa. And it talks about by avodah zarah Torah chsiyolachem after it's talking about the tzibur. So Ashken yachid v'nasi mashiach bein beras kachavim bein b'shar mitzvahs tzibur beras kachavim. How do we know the tzibur? Amar krav im nefesh yilmad el yomi tachton. Im nefesh is what it said before, right? what it said before. And you learn out the Yoma Elyon Mitachnon, learn out rather the Elyon, the one that I talked about before by Avodah Zarah of the Tzibor. You learn that out from the Tachnon, from Benefesh. Elat Tzibor B'Shar Mitzvah. What about Tzibor B'Shar Mitzvah? We understand Samech Yad Rama. So he said when he said Ashkelon, all other mitzvahs you learn out from Avodah Zarah for individuals. But what about the Tzibor B'Shar Mitzvah? Yalef Me'ein in reverse now. You learn out the Tzibor from Einene from Avodah Zarah. The Rebbe High Torah Achas Ma'avalei. What does Rebbe do with Torah Achas? Rebbe says you learn out from Aleh. So what does he talk about? Since the pasuk made a difference between individuals and many people and Tzibor. So Yechidim B'Skila. What does that mean if they're Avodah Zarah? If a Yachid does Avodah Zarah, it's Chayav Skilu. Therefore, their money is saved. Their money's not destroyed. But Merubim, what's Merubim? Iranidachas. If a city sins, they all get by the sword. Therefore, their money is also destroyed. I might think you separate. They have different kabbanas also. The Gemara is going to deal with that. No, the kabbanas are the same. We don't change the kabbanas either. The Gemara is going to ask about what are you talking about? What kind of kabbanas do you mean? We'll get that tomorrow. We're going to skill that because tomorrow is a complicated daf, and I'm at Beis. That's what I call the famous killer Tosfos of Tessim and Beis and Yevamos. The Tosfos, killer Rashi rather. We're not going to learn it inside. Don't worry, but we have to explain it a little bit. And tomorrow is a short day because we stop in at 6:00, right? Both tomorrow and Friday. Tomorrow's a Tainus. And the Tainus starts here in Yerushalayim tomorrow at 4:16. If anybody wants to know, have a good day, everybody. Call to 4:16.